Griggs, my friends, and I would like to share a bit of the story of Annora Brown with you. She was a pioneer conservationist. She was a botanist, a historian, an artist, both with pen and paint, and an innovator. And we call our presentation Annora Brown, Interpreter of the Foothills. Annora Brown grew up in the tiny settlement community of Fort Macleod. It's still known today as the home of the Northwest Mounted Police. As a child, she was fascinated by her community and the people who lived around her and the natural beauty of the whole land. In the beginning, I expected she never thought she'd spend the rest of her professional life in this little rural place, especially since she had just graduated from the art school in Toronto and was offered a job as art instructor at Mount Royal College in Calgary. But life has many strange turns. What we learn is that Annora Brown was always ready to accept a challenge. So our story begins in 1931. What you are about to see is a simple radio drama style play reading. And through it, we try to tell a little bit about her life and work. As with any radio drama, you are invited to use your imagination. The wild prairie reaches right up to the edge of town. To the west and the south, the Rocky Mountains mark the skyline. Waterton Park and Chief Mountain are within view. And many Blackfoot people live close by. Their culture and their different language and their ways of doing things always intrigued Annora Brown. This is Annora Brown country.
I was brought up in two worlds. There was the real world of the prairie distances, high skies, foothills, blue mountains, berry picking, snow, wind, frostbite, mosquitoes, humble frame houses, elevators, wheat fields. I was born in this place called Fort Macleod, Alberta. It is my home. There was also a dream world of the grown-ups around me where nothing ever went amiss. A world of castles, beautiful churches with marvelous choirs, concert halls, trees, sugaring off parties in the maple woods, sandy beaches, ocean waves. The grown-ups around me had all been born in wonderful places called Down East, the old country, back home. None of them felt rooted in Fort Macleod. But I belong here. My mother used to say, those people are thinking about their childhoods. They can't see what's in front of them for looking at what is behind them. Annora, don't spoil your life by looking in far corners for what is right before your eyes.
When I worked in Waterton Park in the late 1950s and the 1960s, Annora Brown's paintings were hanging for sale in the Kootenai Lodge Cafe, and I was smitten by them. I hardly had enough money to pay for a cup of coffee, never mind buy a painting. But the cafe's owners were good to me, and they made me feel welcome to come and sit in the presence of those paintings whenever I could. I remember one particular scene. There was a soft forest background with a little fawn curled up right at the base of the front of the picture. And the mystery to me was how this lady could paint a camouflage that was so real that the little fawn at one time when I looked at it, it was there, and at another time it had disappeared. For the first time, I saw paintings that were about us here in southern Alberta. There were tiger lilies set along scenes with the Cameron Lake roadway. There were mixed wild flowers in the foreground, and there was Waterton Lake and Sawtooth Mountain showing in the distance. And there were glacier lilies that were growing on the slopes of the Bertha Trail. And I kept saying, who is this lady, Annora Brown? What are the rest of her paintings like? And as time went on, I kept being frustrated because I couldn't find anything that showed her work in color. Until many years later, when I read her autobiography called Sketches from Life. She wrote that after she retired. She was about 80 years old and had retired to British Columbia. From that autobiography, I learned she loved the land and the gifts of the nature and the gifts of the people around her. And I learned too how many difficulties she had to face and how hard she worked, and why so little of her work was available today in public viewing. Since that time, many individuals have helped me find out more details about Annora Brown's story. Some have shared their memories. Others have shown me paintings that they bought at that time. And still others are actively sharing information that's found in archives and through studies of her work. And together we are trying to put the pieces of her story back into life. What an incredible person she was. She was creative and innovative and hardworking, always ready to tackle whatever problems came her way. Through what follows, we hope that we can give you a glimpse of this amazing person's life. What we have come to realize is that Annora Brown is South Alberta's artist and innovator extraordinaire.
With the advent of the conceptual art movement in the 60s, in particular the earth artists, it stirred my memories back to the early 1900s when Fort Macleod's town fathers decided to change the water delivery system. Instead of having water delivered by cart, we were going to have a real water and sewer system. And the whole process captured my imagination. Various gangs of men began to lay a survey grid and placed the water and sewer pipes along the edges of the street. I watched the form and rhythm of the spades as the gravel came up from the ditches, as they dug deeper and deeper. The creeping forward of the trenches as the project moved from one street to another. The burial of the pipes. I was captivated by the linear shapes and shifting forms. Despite adult warnings, these trenches drew this 10-year-old like a magnet. Finally, my father, the town secretary, came up with a solution. I could dig my own trench inside our yard along the fence. With grim determination, I planned my design and started to move the dirt and gravel. My brother soon lost interest, but Father helped me lift the boulders. This was my venture. By the time I was finished, I had completed a trench 20 feet long, 2 feet deep at one end and 6 feet deep at the other. My first attempt at conceptual art.
By the time Annora was a child, Waterton Lakes was set aside as a reserved area. Kootenai Brown, the park keeper, was well known on the streets of Fort Macleod. Father Albert Lacombe had served the local Catholic parish while attending to his mission to the Blackfoot people. Ladies who were members of the Famous Five visited the community regularly, seeking support for the Women as Persons movement. Annora remembered the coming of lights, the telephone, and the first cars to chug down the street. Those cars were always in need of tire repairs, a change of spark plugs, more oil, and new fan belts. Later, Annora's favorite ventures were to travel west by car to the Porcupine Hills, the Crow's Nest Pass, and Waterton Park on sketching expeditions. What could have been more fortunate? While visiting her aunt in Toronto, Annora was encouraged to try a term at the Ontario College of Art. There she found teachers like Arthur Lismer and fellow students who were anxious to experiment with art design, texture, and structure. She was encouraged by J.E.H. MacDonald, who visited the Rockies regularly and understood her eye for the big sky. And she and her classmates sat in the studio with Lauren Harris while he told stories of painting on the shield with other members of the group of 7. For this young recruit, it was so much more than a dream come true. After completing her studies, Mount Royal College offered her a teaching position in Calgary. She also taught a few classes at the Banff School of Art. It was during this time that Annora and I became traveling buddies. I was the dietitian at Mount Royal College. We loved packing picnic lunches and art supplies and heading to the mountains. Then devastating word arrived from home. Your mother has had a stroke, her father wrote, and you are needed at home. Besides, it was 1930. Drought and depression made life harsh. Annora went back to Fort Macleod to be the family's housekeeper and nurse. Doris Hunt, her artist friend from Winnipeg, and I tried to spend time with her when we could. A few thoughtful neighbors helped by sitting with Mrs. Brown to give Annora a break. That gave us a chance to get away on our sketching ventures.